How's everyone? Good? Yay, we got a decent crowd for this one. That's good. So I don't know if any of you guys read what I had posted on the internet about my presentation for today before you came to come. It's still very geared towards that, but there was a few issues that I had with the RESTful services, so it's been changed a little bit to what the issues were and really the ways around them. So there are ways. The ways are researched. It's just the amount of timing that I had to do it. What was happening with the RESTful services, I could get everything that I was putting into Drupal 8, but then I'm going to go over the issues I had with actually pushing something back into Drupal 8 from my front end. So a little bit of background from me. I'm actually a front-end dev working in a Drupal shop called Therefore, the one that's actually sponsoring this room. And I decided that I want to do something a little bit more fun, less business-oriented. So there might be some higher level code examples, and there'll be some 3D stuff at the end and a little bit of music. So the complete setup, or should I say the incomplete setup, this is what I was going for. So I started out and my boss came out to me, he's like, Ryan, do a talk for Drupal. And I decided that I was like, okay, what I'm going to do is, I know that Drupal 8 has the new headless RESTful service that's supposed to be provided through the core Drupal 8. So I was like, okay, I want to take a front-end framework, I want to take the core Drupal 8, and I want to make them play together really well without me having to learn how to add modules, write modules, do all this kind of stuff. So that worked out really, really well at first when I had my basic front-end set up and I had my basic back-end set up. So what happened from there was I set up my Drupal site. I actually started creating my entities, which were just songs for my playlist and equalizer that I made. So the front end part is just a simple music player with an equalizer, and on the back end, Drupal was going to serve me all the information. So when I added that into Drupal, it was fine. When I went to do my gets, it was fine. So then I completed the rest of it, and then I got to the point where from my application, I wanted a simple button to say, hey, I'm going to click to add a song. So I'll show you this part for now. So realistically, this was my little button that I added at the end, and like all this was coming from Drupal, and I just wanted to add a song. So what happened is that when I went to do that, out of the box, Drupal, as of right now, in their new Drupal 8 RESTful services, they're using JSON HAL, not just plain JSON. So I'm actually going to come back to this slide. And what happens with that, I should actually do the other ones first, but most JS developers don't use HAL, right? So for me, it was a new experience for me. And I went and I researched how to use HAL and stuff like that. And for Drupal, within Drupal, serving the front and back, it makes a ton of sense, because linking to your entity relationships and stuff like that becomes very, very easy using HAL. Now, we don't do a whole lot of that when we're doing our front-end work. We like flat JSON. So the flat JSON structure helps us a lot. I don't know, does anyone here do any front-end at all? Anybody do any? Okay. So a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about when you see your flat JSON file and you get your list of items and all the attributes to your items. It's a little bit different the way that the HAL looks, and there's a couple links there that you can actually go. I won't get into all of it, because one is I have a very basic knowledge and it's kind of boring. So, but if you want to look into it, it's just a different specification. And what happens is if you're using anything like Famous or Angular or any of these sort of things where they make it really easy to iterate through items and like two-way bindings and stuff like this, it works really, really well with a flat layered notation like JSON. But when you add in the HAL part, it gets very, very, very difficult. And in order to actually post something to a server using the HAL, with JS, you need extra libraries and stuff that you have to bring in to do it. So it gets a little bit messy and realistically very time-consuming. So that's that. So what I'm going to actually go over, so does anybody ever hear of Famous at all? Did anybody here ever hear of the front-end framework? All right. I've been showing Alex every day when they have updates and stuff of how I'm like a little schoolboy. I'm like, yay, so exciting. So what happened is that they're another thing like Angular, except what they do is you don't really write any HTML. I will actually, at the end of this, I will show you the code of my HTML page. All it does is include the famous JavaScript file, and from there, it actually creates everything through JS. So it kind of hijacks the DOM, and before the DOM renders, everything's done through Famous, so you never have any of these things where the DOM renders before an element's available. Like, I'm sure you guys have all used jQuery, and half the web page loads, jQuery runs something, and it's like, oh, this element's missing. That will not happen in Famous because it actually goes through a different, it just renders everything different through the DOM. And it actually creates all your DOM elements through JavaScript itself. So one thing that I did was they have a really, really, really good rendering engine. So I decided that I wanted to use this rendering engine in order to create a 3D equalizer for myself. The funny thing is, as I showed my boss the other day, Famous actually a couple days ago released their whole 3D library that you can now download and use. So where I thought I was being clever to use their engine in order to get my 60 frames per second, I guess they already had that idea in the beginning and they released their own. So that was kind of cool, and blows mine out of the water, by the way. So don't expect anything super, super great. Okay, so now, sorry, like the slides aren't the best because I actually had a different presentation, like I said before I had this issue. So I decided to go this way instead. I'm going to explain a few problems that I had while setting up the RESTful service. The first thing is I'm guessing you guys all know when you're using Drupal, it's your back end, front end, and when you're using it that way. So it's all running from the same domain, same port. And so what happens is that when I'm running my front end framework, actually on a different domain than the Drupal domain, then you get into the issue of cores. Does anybody have any issues with cores before at all, or do anything with it? Okay, so that's what stops you from being able to make cross-domain requests. So if someone tries to go into your website, get information from your website from another website, then cores is what's going to stop that application from being able to do that. So Drupal's RESTful service does not have cores out of the box. So there's another reason why I would have had to add another module in order to enable cores. Now I do have, as you can see below, I have 3 solutions that I found that you can get around this. One is to simply go into your HTTP access and say, accept all, and just let anybody come into your web server or whatever you want to do. I never said it was a good solution, I said it was a solution. The second one is you can actually, most people I assume, like when you guys run your Drupal, most people are running it through Apache. Now this is their little guide of how to get it working through Apache to get your cores to work. Same thing with any other servers that you're going to use. It will be very similar to the Apache one. And the third one is the obvious one, is make your own module or find one on the internet somewhere. So those are 3 things that you can do to get around the problem. But as I said, I wanted to use 2 frameworks out of the box, and this is one issue that stopped me from doing that. Second one was the one I already talked about, the HAL plus JSON. So this application, or this object type, really, really, really is not good. Like I said, there's a couple links there that you can also check out more stuff. I'm not going to get too much into HAL and JSON because I'm hoping that most of you guys know. And this is actually more. So this is a lot in your face. But it's just talking about the way that you do posts and patch and delete and stuff through HAL is actually a lot different than the way that you do it just through plain JSON. Now, with HAL can attach itself to XML as well. And it's just really a way of formatting it. But the natural way that JSON is formatted is, for me personally, is much more preferred. And I find it a lot easier to work with while I'm working with front-end frameworks. So from a front-end dev, if you're a back-end dev, minus the HAL, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I just don't prefer it. The other part was, okay, so once I added all my songs into my Drupal database, I had like, I had the MP3s, the album art, the titles, your regular ID3 tag stuff into. Oh, okay, perfect. Awesome. Like my presentation. So what happened is when I was providing this RESTful service, after adding everything in, there's two types of outputs that you can have for your RESTful service through Drupal 8. One way is the actual just the JSON way, and the other is the JSON how. And they both come out through either providing an entity, or you can actually set it up to just output fields, and then set up relationships in the, like there's an events column, you set up relationships, and then you can just output whatever fields you want. So that's the way I decided to do it, which is great. So when I was getting my information, my front-end application was working fine, and then I got to the point where I needed to post something to it. So I wanted to save something to my server, and the only way to do that was if it was actually based on entities and not fields that I already set up and, try to do it that way. So I wanted something that was really agnostic to where the data was coming from, and realistically, when I'm setting it up with these entities, when you're actually parsing through the tree that of whatever object you're getting, you're not making it very agnostic at that point. So it just made it really, really, really hard, and the fact that I didn't have any I didn't have any time to actually set up all these extra stuff, and it actually that would have been another presentation again, because it was completely against what I was trying to do in the beginning, which, like I said, is just two of these frameworks out of box. I have my little vent boy meme, because that was me venting about. All right, so I guess we're going to get more into what I think is the fun stuff. I got a little 2.5-minute video here of this is what turned me on to Famous. This is what really got me going of like, I can't believe a front-end framework can render this fast and can do these kind of things. So, is that good? The boys from work already saw this, so they're probably bored of it. The hand's actually in the video too, by the way. At first I was like, oh, that was one of the guys from work trying to screw me out. But yeah, it's someone on an iPad is what it is. So this is actually running through an iPad. And this is actually not using WebGL, and it's not using Canvas. This is actually pure HTML DOM elements and using CSS3 3D transforms.
It's not Drupal.
Yeah, it's pretty. Am I getting anywhere, guys? It's very performant. I have half the periodic table down now just from watching the video so many times. So another cool part about this, if you actually look at the HTML file from the project, it's like HTML, open close tag, title, some metadata, and then it's just one element that Famous attaches itself to, and everything else is done dynamically through JS. We're done. Oh, Don't want to play it again. So, pretty cool, hey? All right. So now I have some code examples. I'll actually give you the example first, and then if you guys want to know like how I did anything, I'd really like if you guys like ask questions. Like, don't be afraid to raise your hand at any time. It will actually make my presentation longer and hopefully a little bit better if you do. So that would be great. And the code that I wrote is actually, besides the fact that my overall project, I guess, failed in what it was supposed to do, although it succeeded in the fact that I did learn a lot about Drupal, and so that was a good thing. So what I did was, it's pretty simple. Over on this side, so this is all in Famous here. They use what are called surfaces. I'll bring up the Famous main site. So that's like a really, really hardcore example. The hello world that they had there is not really a hello world, right? It's like the complete opposite of a hello world. So this is more the basic stuff. So as you can see, even from these code examples here, what they're doing is, Famous just really lets you make surfaces. So, and it's really, really good at being able to position DOM elements for you. So anyone ever have the issue of absolute centering? Remember that, like especially like 5 years ago, you try to absolutely center something in the center of the screen and you have so many CSS hacks, you were like almost throwing up. It's just so bad. So what they did was they tried to solve this problem, and they did very, very well at it. It's really good for animations and stuff, but the main purpose of it is just being able to create surfaces. So it just thinks of your website as, you just have a 2D plane in front of you, and it's like you can put anything wherever you want to put it. So it gives you the ability of any let's say web or image editing tool where, like if you go into Photoshop, you can center something by the center of the canvas or the center of the image itself. So you give the image an origin, which maybe the top left corner could be the center, and then you give it where you want it on the canvas, which can also have all those things as well. So Famous lets you be able to do that. So you can just say, I want this to be in the complete center of the screen, so halfway in both directions, and I want it to be in the center origin of the item itself, and then you get something that's perfectly centered. Wonderful. So it was really, really good for that. It also has a bunch of views and stuff that you can use, which is like scroll views like this, your basic building blocks. So then, I never reviewed this music either, so I had to make sure I put on something without curse words, which I think everything here is pretty family friendly.
It doesn't like a curse word.
Yeah, that's right. It's like, it's alright as long as it's Drake. Like he's from Toronto, everyone will allow that. Okay, so the other thing that I did was when I was using it, like I was saying, I thought Famous's rendering engine was really, really, really nice and very performant. So I decided to use that rendering engine, and it doesn't seem to want to render quite as well through the projector. Either way, so I saw something that was very performant, and so has anyone here ever used the web browser itself, its way of refreshing of the screen? It's you just request an animation frame in the web browser, and Chrome and any WebKit, and as well as IE, I believe has it as well. And you can actually just run frames like that, and you can run animations through the web browser, through the web browser's new API, which a bunch of HTML5 stuff has been added, such as audio and stuff like that. So they have the ability to do that. Now the thing is, it's not very performant when it comes to stuff like this and drawing on canvas. So like I said, with Famous's engine, its refresh engine is actually what's drawing my frames right now. And I just use that to draw it. I took a library called Foria. It's a very, very, very basic physics library for doing 3D transforms and a lot of matrix operations, and just decided to do this and just play around until I came up with something that kind of looked kind of cool. I had a bunch of different equalizers as well that I can bring up if you want to see them, but I think this really just proves the point on its own. So it's really, really cool. This is not using WebGL either. It is using Canvas. But there is no WebGL. With WebGL, you can get a lot more performance as well, because then you can use the hardware acceleration, right? So if you're using a good graphics card or something like that, you can really, really, really get into some super cool stuff. And so, yeah, that's that part. Absolutely.
What kind of variables are creating the different shapes and colors?
What variable? Sorry?
Depending on the sound.
Okay, yeah, so what happens is, okay, so what I use to be able to get the bytes that are used for this, right now it's using 256 bytes that it's breaking an MP3 down into. So as of HTML5, they have a web audio API, which allows you to get frequency data from an MP3, and it also allows you to get time domain data. Those are just two ways that they measure sound. You'll usually notice the frequency one is usually the one that looks like the sine wave all the time, and then the time domain data one is usually what's represented as a bar graph of some sort in an equalizer. They give you those, and those are just available through the web browser and through WebKit, and so that's how it breaks that down. And then all this does is right now it's taking each one of those bytes, it represents it by a rectangle, and it just scales based on the result or of the value of the byte. And all the bytes are valued from 1 to 128 or 0 to 128. Yep. And this just scales based on whatever the value is. I do actually, it's funny because I actually have the one that is normally frequency is looks pretty crappy in the bar scale because it's very, very, very short and small. So that should be represented by an actual line graph instead. But let's see if we have some code examples here. Okay, before I actually show any code examples, how many people actually want to see code examples? Okay, I think that's enough. Okay. Yeah? I've never made it bigger before. I'm pretty sure it is. We good? One more? There you go. Perfect. Okay. So, this is all done. Famous uses require for importing your other objects as well. So, this for you right here is the one that I extended. I just kept his name there because and what it's doing is these are pretty simple. These are how all the tessellated plane is just a tile plane, so it's the wireframe plane that you see underneath the equalizer, and it's just generating spheres and stuff like that. I will actually right here in main. All right, so this is like my camera stuff here, and then you can actually see how many lines it is. It's 288 for the main file that's actually doing everything. Outside of the main file, there is a bunch more that's there, but it's mostly to create either the shapes or another one is actually the equalizer itself. So here's a simple redraw, and that's it. That in my redraw, the thing that's actually running every single time that this is playing is just this. So it sends it over to the equalizer just changes the shape, and this is actually the renderer here. These are both for the 3D library, but it's actually, this redraw function is actually being ran through Famous itself. But as you can see, like, it may seem like it's a lot of values and stuff there, but everything's really, really basic. Like, this whole block right here is just for the ability to be able to change your focal points and where the camera's looking and the position of the camera, and that's one big block just for that. And that's actually just as much code as like all the rest of it. So with the surfaces and stuff, I'll actually show you the top where I actually created the surfaces. The engine right there is Famous. So the engine, oh crap, sorry guys. Okay, and click there so I can scroll down through. So the engine's actually made through Famous. You just set up your perspective, and then all you're doing is every time that I want a new DOM element, you can actually throw in HTML into the content of the surface itself, but this is how they're made. So all it does is, if I want to create a scene and I want it to be completely full screen, so I want it to take up full width, full height, all I say is undefine, and then Famous goes and finds out everything for me. I don't have to do anything. All I have to do is just type that, which is really, really, really nice. And then it's actually completely responsive as well, which is nice. And you can see it's just more and more views. And you can actually start like just popping, see where it says song surfaces. That's actually just a little blocks where you saw the songs. Once you start popping stuff into that array, it'll automatically just start adding in. And you can obviously just add in whatever you want. And remember that button that I said that didn't work? So this is what happens if, obviously I'm not going to make an extra surface just for a little, plus sign then add song. So in any surface, you can actually put in content and write in any text, HTML, or anything that the web browser will accept. You can just throw it right in there, and it'll work. This is what got me for like alignment issues and stuff like that, because I'm one of these people, I don't know about you guys, but when I want an element to be in a certain spot and it's not there, I can't just like leave it and be like, okay, maybe it's all right, a little bit to the right or whatever. I like it how I see it in my head to be shown on the screen. And if it starts popping around or moving around, it's just something that gets to me. So the ability of like, you can just put in a modifier. And then once you put in the modifier, as you can see, this is very self-explanatory. This is for the tools container, which is like obviously those little bars that you saw. And it's just aligning center, which gives me something that's completely centered, which is super great. Here's another example here, this guy here on the side container. All it does is I added a class, and it just adds a CSS class to it, which I can then style through whatever you want to use. I'm using Sass. And then the size-wise, this guy's a little bit different. So I actually wanted to give this guy a absolute width, which was 300. And then anything else, I can, grab the information from any of the other surfaces and then play around with it as I will. And this one just so happens that it ends up being 300 width, and it's the height of the application minus 50, which is the little play bar at the bottom. So it just makes everything super, super easy to make. I want to show you this as well, because this is the least amount of information, but is actually the coolest. So this is the HTML file that runs everything. That's it. So there's very, very, very little that you have to do. Famous imports some of its stuff, like half of it, like that, like that's a font, right? So, and then everything else. Look at my body. There's just nothing. So it's really, really cool that you have JS of instead of writing your HTML, waiting for it to load, and then using your JS to manipulate your DOM through jQuery or whatever you use. And where a lot of times that I found throughout the years, like I've been pretty good at it not backfiring, but it still backfires on me sometime. An element gets removed, you lose a reference, things start going haywire, and then you have a console log of 50 that's there, and you don't have a clue why. Anytime that happens in Famous, you'll actually know exactly why your console log has 50. So you actually made a mistake that's very easy to find. You're not running around figuring out where, because once the reference gone, it doesn't even know what the name is anymore. So that got rid of a lot of the frustrations. So when it comes to so it works really well. Like anyone here use Angular before? Which is, so that's really good for it as well. I just find Famous is a little bit better. Now Famous still has a lot of work to do. I did it on the 0.3 beta, so it's still fairly new. And everything hasn't been ironed out, but their releases, even though they're in the beta stage, are very, very, very solid. And so that was my presentation of how headless Drupal works. Alex.
So obviously none of the guys at the office helped you connect Drupal to it. That was very friendly of them. So if you
Well, Scott tried. Scott tried, but he kept telling me to add modules, and I'm like, I don't want to add modules. I don't want to add modules.
So what I was wondering is maybe if you do a little run through of how you tried to make it connect, because when you showed it to me originally, it was actually connecting.
It was, yep.
Yeah, maybe some of the helpful people in this room can
Okay.
help out with that.
Yeah, so yeah, realistically, it was what you saw that was working is the get. I can get to work perfectly fine. I can serve my front end information very, very, very easily. It's actually sending the information back to the server that was really hard. So here is an actual entity that I just set up. There's no songs are actually added into this guy because obviously I couldn't get anything to post into it, and I didn't add any manually. On the laptop, there is some at work, but that doesn't help us now. So what was happening is, see this? Okay, have you guys seen this in Drupal 8 before? This, I'm pretty sure this is in Drupal 7. It's a view, but now they have the ability that, okay, this is what I'll show you. In configuration, you have to enable the new RESTful services. So make sure you do this beforehand, because you won't get the ability to add a REST endpoint if you don't. Sorry, it's an extend. See, this is how good I am with Drupal. So down here at the bottom, you get your web services, and as you can see, there's the HAL guy that I love, and here's your stuff for your RESTful services. So once you enable these four, you get the ability to come in, create a content type, and then you can build a view on it and provide a RESTful endpoint, which I will just show you here really quickly. We'll just do one right from the start because it doesn't take very long at all. So the actual process of setting it up, like besides the issues I had with the connection, the setting it up is actually super great. I found it really, really, really easy to do. To actually get it set up, it's just my issues actually came with the technologies that they're using to post to the server. So we'll just call it test. And we'll take a song. And this is it. So once you enable that, you get this. And then that is our endpoint. So anything from there, if you go use Postman or use any front-end framework, I can grab stuff from this super easily. So like I said, that wasn't my issue. It was the posting. So what happens is that while I was reading the data onto my front end, see how it says show entity here? I was using show fields, which is able to grab the fields from the database and send them to me. Now, an issue is not only, like I said, with the HAL part, it's also the fact that when it's set up as fields, it doesn't take the information in the same way, and it will not save it properly as an entity to the database because it needs to be an entity in order to save it as an entity, which actually makes sense. But it just made it very, very difficult, and so that was the issue I was running in with the actual posting to Drupal. So one of the things is that it can be done, add extra modules. Even the Drupal 7, when I was looking at the Drupal 7 RESTful services, like it's a module that you can actually add on. It doesn't come out of box like it does in Drupal 8. Does have the ability to handle this much better. But like I said, using Drupal 8 and trying to do the core RESTful services and use it, then I couldn't avoid pumping in extra stuff in order to get it to work. So, yeah, does that answer it enough? Or any more questions? All right. Well, there we.
This wouldn't be about this necessarily, but the famous.
Yeah, sure.
You've got no body tag. How does that work for accessibility and?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, like, yeah, if you want to do accessibility, like, let's say tab indexing and stuff like that, you can actually just add all those attributes into the surface. You can tell you give it a tab index of 0, and it's going to follow. If you give everything that you want, like let's say every link that you have, you give it a tab index of 0, just like you do in any JavaScript time that you add an element. Once you do that, it will actually tab as the natural flow of the website as well. But it's the same way as you do it in normal JavaScript as well, because that comes about a bit, because we do a fair amount of accessibility at work. But that's all you have to do. You just give it an attribute. You just tell it, tab index 0, and then you can either tell it a different number to give it an absolute one, but if you do 0, it'll follow the normal flow of the web page. But it's a good question. Anybody else? You can test my Drupal knowledge if you want. You can really stump me. No? I guess if there's no more questions, I guess we're done. Thank you very much, guys.